What is up, people? Today I'm going to review the Blu-ray of The Mummy 2017. I've already reviewed the actual movie itself, and I will put that down in the show notes for you guys. And today I'm going to be reviewing the 4K Blu-ray and the standard Blu-ray. Coming up for you guys next. What's up, people? As I just said, I am going to be reviewing the Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray of The Mummy 2017, and we will get right into it. And as I always do, I am going to start off with the standard Blu-ray just because of the fact that that is where the majority of the people are going to view it, and that is where I always start. Now, The Mummy was actually filmed in 35mm and then mastered in a 2K source, and that is important for the Blu-ray just because of the fact that this is a very filmy kind of movie, and that is something that surprised me about this because I expected this to look a lot more slick than it did, and that's not exactly a bad thing. That is just something that surprised me, and I came to like it after the initial shock. You see, there is a decent amount of grain on the screen here, and that is because of the fact that this was actually shot on film, and I've really got to digging it just because it brought me back to the way that films were shot back before the digital age, where darks are a lot more inkier and they are just a lot more prominent, and this movie just has like a very film-like, not specifically old school, but a really film-like vibe, and that I do dig, and I don't feel like I get enough of today. That isn't to say that clarity and detail are a problem here, and like I just said, this was bumped up to a 2K source. There is plenty of clarity and detail to this movie, and specifically when you compare it to the 1999 Mummy film with Brendan Fraser that also came out in 4K recently. This looks significantly better than that with a lot more detail, of course, as it should be. Specifically, you know, when you look at that scene where Tom Cruise is trying to get out of the airplane and there's a bunch of debris flying around him and he is just, you know, trying to fight for his life to get out of there, that scene is incredibly detailed with debris flying all around him, and it is very engaging in that way. I feel like the clarity and the detail that is done here is very well integrated in a movie that has more of a film-like quality to it, and I feel like the balance between that is very well integrated into this movie. CG shots come across very well here. This is a very CG-heavy film. It is unnecessarily so at times, and that is just what's going on with the current films of today, and this definitely falls on the more CG heavy side of things. I will just say that that doesn't interfere with Tom Cruise's action scenes. They never CG Tom Cruise, and that is a good thing. I want to see him do the kind of action that he does, and it feels very real and tactile. That is exactly what they keep here, but the CG that is done here comes across pretty damn well, and overall, this Blu-ray comes across really well, and for that, I will have to give it a 9 out of 10. This is a really good looking Blu-ray that I don't mind having in my collection. Now, moving on to the 4K release. As I said, this was shot on film and then mastered in a 2K source, so that means that for the 4K Blu-ray, this is an up conversion from that original 2K source. And it fares pretty damn well here. Now, a lot of these up conversions fall in the same range for me, and this film, it's not going to subvert that, but at the same point in time, it definitely stays in that better range, and that's a good thing. As I said, you do get the milky, darky blacks in this film from being actually shot on film, and that definitely does come across the best here with the HDR feature. HDR allows us to have deeper black levels, and the blacks definitely come across better here, especially on Tom Cruise's suit that he wears on the Blu-ray. It definitely comes across as being very dark, and you don't see a lot of detail on it. On the 4K Blu-ray, you definitely see a lot of detail in his spiffy black suit, and he looks very spiffy and proper. As for the deeper color spectrum that this movie is supposed to have with the HDR, I didn't notice a very specific uptick in color spectrum in this movie, and I feel like that it's a little bit more subtle at times. I noticed it the most in the CG elements of the movie. I feel like the CG really pops in 4K, and this movie is no different. Every time that you have a more CG heavy scene, it looks better on this 4K release. There's a marginal uptick in detail and clarity. You get a lot more detail with Tom Cruise's spiffy suit that I just mentioned. And you get a decent amount of clarity, seeing through the graininess of the film a little more in this 4K transfer. And that's what you get here. You just get a little more fine-tuning in this 4K release. And for that, I'm going to have to give it an 8 out of 10. This isn't going to blow anybody's socks off, but it is a solid 4K release, and that is just how I feel about it. Next, I am going to get into the audio of The Mummy 2017, and we're going to be talking about a Dolby Atmos track. I love Dolby Atmos, and we're going to be talking about that next. So, the audio of The Mummy 2017. Well, let me tell you, it fares pretty damn well. Pretty well. Not great, but pretty well. In the matter of fact, I'm going to say that this is one of the lesser Dolby Atmos tracks that I have in my collection. I have tons of Dolby Atmos tracks in my collection, and you know, I just felt like this one lacked a little TLC. I always try to start off with the positives here, and this track feels very dynamic. You definitely have a hefty front speaker track that helps out your subwoofer, and the surrounds are very active as well. Frequency levels are great. Highs are pretty damn high, and lows are pretty damn low, with the midpoints being great also. And when you have very action-oriented scenes like Tom Cruise trying to get out of the airplane, that came across incredibly well in the Dolby Atmos track, and really, that is a very engaging way to actually see this movie, and I felt like it was portrayed pretty well in this Dolby Atmos track. That is with the exception of one thing, and that is that the height speakers are kind of light. I felt like I was constantly going up and tapping on those height speakers saying, "Hello up there! Hello!" I didn't really get a lot of action from my height speakers, and that was kind of surprising. I feel like a movie like this should have a lot of action up there, and I felt like it was kind of light. And for that, I'm going to have to give the Dolby Atmos track a 8 out of 10. It's not the worst, but not the best. It's just kind of there. So next, we are going to talk about the special features, and you guys all know how much Tom Cruise loves to talk about his movies, so we know that there will be a bunch of special features, and I will talk about them next. So the special features for The Mummy 2017. Guess what, people? this actually has a decent amount of special features. Congratulations! Finally, a movie that I can review with a decent amount of special features. So let's get right into them. First is a lengthy discussion between Cruise and the director Alex Kurtzman. This is a very candid, kind of, honest interview here, and I do like that. You really get the sense of how much energy Tom Cruise brings to the cast and the crew with this. And as much as people like to dog on Tom Cruise, I feel like he's a person that is very dedicated to his craft, and he tries really hard. And you definitely get his enthusiasm for what he does in this interview. And keep on doing what you're doing, Tom, because I like it. Next is a short featurette where they talk about how they did the 0G for the plane crash scene. It is pretty damn exciting to actually see how it's done and to see Tom Cruise actually doing his own stunts. More power to you, guy. I like what you do. There are also two smaller featurettes that have basically Tom Cruise doing action-y kind of stuff, and he shows you how he does his action, and he's pretty good at what he does. There is also a smaller featurette where Russell Crowe talks about becoming Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and about this new universe and the role that he will play in it. And it is interesting to hear it. I just wish that it wasn't in this movie because it feels very cramped as it is. There is another featurette where Tom Cruise talks about his plight of the movie and how he is searching for his soul. That is something that I really wanted to play in this movie, but I already talked about it. It doesn't play in this movie, so I don't really like this featurette because what they're talking about doesn't come across on screen, and that can get kind of annoying. Now, there is also a commentary that is pretty extensive and very cool, and there is also an animated featurette. There are, still galleries and photos that you can look at and deleted scenes. This is a pretty cram-packed Blu-ray, and I feel like this has a decent amount of special features on it. And for that, I will give it a 7 out of 10. This is actually a decent special feature setup. So next, we are going to get into the final thoughts and last looks at The Mummy 2017 when I come right back. So my last look at The Mummy 2017. This is a very divisive movie, folks. Some people like it, a lot of people hate it, and I am here to tell you that I am kind of right in the middle down the road with it. I'm interested to see what this dark universe is, and I'm definitely interested to see where this whole story goes, especially after the ending of this movie that I feel like was kind of unearned, but at the same point in time, it leaves you in a very curious spot where you're kind of just like, I don't know where you're going with this, so I am intrigued. I would equate this movie to me going to Brazilian barbecue. I frequently go to a Brazilian barbecue place, and when I go, I always am looking forward to it, and there are definitely elements to this movie that I would kind of want to revisit because I did like it, like the action. But in the end, when I leave Brazilian barbecue, I feel stuffed, and I feel bloated, and I feel like I don't want any more, and bleh. And that is what this movie ultimately made me feel like. I felt stuffed, I felt like it was bloated, and I felt very blah. So, that is how I feel about The Mummy 2017, and how I feel about the Blu-ray and the 4K Blu-ray release. The standard Blu-ray got a 27 out of 40. That's when you added up all of my scores, and the 4K release got a 26 out of 40. I am starting to realize that most of my reviews are falling into the higher 20 range. I want to get more 30s in, so what am I going to talk about next? Well, Blade Runner came out in 4K last week, and I didn't get to talk about it because I wanted to talk about something very relevant for when my YouTube channel goes live. So next, I'm going to get into the 4K Blu-ray release of Blade Runner that I can't wait to talk to you guys about. I have previously, I just watched it last night, and man, I have some stories to tell you guys. I am looking forward to talking to you guys about it. And I'm looking forward to if you guys agree with me about this movie. And if you hated it, I want to hear about it down below. If you liked it, I want to hear about it too. And I want discussions with you guys about this stuff. Everybody, comment below. Let's see how many I can get. And I will see all of you guys next time. Thank you, people, for watching me so early on.